We have the mug back!
Alright, the journey begins. Burnings Ute and mug convoy. How did you go?
Not too bad. It started to stutter. I think it's either running out of diesel or it got some bad diesel.
Alright, let's show the beast. I just did a little stop on the side of the road just to make sure the aluminium is still in place, everything is good, the mug is good. Now onto the highway.
Wow. That looks alright.
Yeah, you're good. Oh my god, you're on the roof. Hello.
Hello.
Gosh, it feels weird. We are on the roof. Got a good view. I can imagine us having like a coffee from the roof.
I think right there. Cheers.
Facing the ocean. Yeah, we already can vision it together. So that is the great news. We want to stay mostly positive in this video, show you the camper, and as well explain all of the specs.
But we also want to keep the channel transparent and real. So at the end of the video, we'll kind of go over what exactly happened and the reason why I was so ticked off in the last video that you guys saw. Alright, so first up, just want to go over a little bit about the flooring. Now we've mentioned it a little bit previously in some other videos, but it is a really important aspect of the build. Now we wanted to keep the outside or sort of external structure and shell completely wood-free. So we've decided to go with this composite material called Thermo-Lite. Now what it is it's a whole bunch of fiberglass fibers, I guess, as well as some matting that runs right through the actual substrate, and it's kind of like a very, very high density foam. The benefit of it is it sort of resembles wood structurally, but it can't take on any water and it doesn't warp. So that was the main reason we went with it. Again, went with 19 millimeters thick. We supplied the Thermo-Lite sheets because we managed to track some down in Western Australia. The box supplier, he was the one who first suggested Thermo-Lite. He actually couldn't find any from his supplier. So we found that and we provided 4 big sheets for him. And then he installed it into the floor. Now the floor was an interesting one because we're building straight onto our existing tray, that torsion-free subframe that we wanted to keep. The floor's not perfectly level. I mean, the Unimogs are famous for it. They never had to be perfectly level. So he ended up cutting a bunch of strips out of it and using it as battens underneath along the structural supports of the tray, and then laid the main sheets on top, bolted it down as well as glued. Now, I didn't want to at first go with bolts because it creates what's called a thermal bridge or a cold bridge. So that means, if you show here, Ange, whatever touches steel outside and has steel on the inside, this will be the temperature of outside, no matter how well insulated your box is. So for instance, if it's icy outside, these will ice up. So that was what I wanted to avoid. The only place we've got them is in the floor now. I will secure them all and make them, basically break that thermal bridge. So that's the only metal we've got in the structuring. But yeah, that's the flooring, 19mm Thermo-Lite.
For the cost for the floor, the material itself, the Thermo-Lite sheets, $1,960 Australian dollars. And for the labor and materials from the supplier to install it, it was 475 Australian dollars.
All right, so now onto the structure itself. This is what all the walls are made out of and the ceiling. We went with this stuff, which is called XPS foam, and it is sandwiched between two sheets of 2mm fiberglass. Now, there is no other steel or aluminium frame in this box. There doesn't need to be. This is incredibly rigid and strong. It can also flex, so it can take heaps of punishment off-road as well. And it is what the majority of the European suppliers, which have these like 300,000 euro builds, are building their trucks out of. You can build a refrigeration truck out of it because the insulation value is incredible. And I didn't believe any of this at first, nor did Ange. On paper, it just doesn't sound like you can make something structural just out of this without any sort of steel support, but you can. So I jumped up and down on a tire, so I'll insert that clip. Time for a stress test. Now this is 30mm. The box itself is 40, so it's quite a bit thicker. I'm just putting on the very edge of the tire. I'm just going to do a stress test, see. That's impressive.
It doesn't even bend, does it?
That's impressive. Bends a tiny bit, but not much. That's cool. That gives me the confidence that I can walk around up there.
That's very true.
Yeah. It actually really shows just how strong this stuff is. So again, 40mm thick, and that is the entire structure. You can also have conduits put through. Now, this way you can run cabling. We decided, and this caused me so many headaches because I've never dealt with conduit before. I've never built a house. So what there is there's 8 conduits in total. A bunch of those are in this wall and they join up with the ceiling. Now that's so that I can drill a hole wherever there's a conduit and put a light in, or for instance the fan. But it really took me a long time to get my head around it, and I just couldn't really get any practical information. But the box supplier said, you know, it's pretty straightforward. I'll run some string. He didn't run string, but that's not the main reason why I was so ticked off in that last video, but I'll get to that later on. But yeah, that's the stuff there. Pretty cool.
All right, now to the dimension of the box, which was probably the trickiest part to get right. Starting with the width. The width was the easiest part. It is 2.4 meter wide, which is basically the width of the Unimog tray. So this one was a no-brainer. Now the length is just above 4.5 meter long, which is great. It's a bit longer than the tray because of that 45-degree angle departure, which Chris will tell you about in a second. And now for the height. The height was the trickiest part. So overall from the exterior, we are just under 2.6 meters because we've got a ceiling of 40mm, a flooring of 90mm. That leaves us with the internal height of 2 meters. The reason we came with that number is so that Chris can be comfortable inside. Living full time, you don't want to have to be like that the whole time. Now with the external height, we are just above 3.5 meter high, which for us was really important. We want to obviously travel around Australia, but we want as well to go internationally, especially Europe potentially in the coming years if COVID allows. In Europe, with the bridge clearance, we definitely wanted to stay under the 3.7 meter mark, which a lot of expedition truck owners have told me it is basically the height you want to stay under. So just when you design your box, just keep in mind your overall height, which is really important. So the total cost for the 5 panels, the 6 cutouts, the 8 conduits is 8,187 Australian dollars.
All right, so just to elaborate a little bit about this 45-degree angle at the rear here that we decided to go with. Now in Australia, you can have 60% of the total wheelbase hanging off the rear axle. So you can have 60% of that total wheelbase hanging off the back of the truck, otherwise it's illegal. So this is not quite our maximum, but that is why we can legally have some more living space off the back. Now, if the box was out here, not only do I think it would look a bit strange, but we would massively lose our departure angle going off-road. So that was the reason we went with that 45-degree angle, and we're gonna make it so that it kind of works with our design as well. But yeah, that was an interesting one to kind of work out for Ange and I. So then we've also got an angle at the top, right up there. So main reason for that was purely just looks. We didn't want to have a really square shape. I mean, obviously it's pretty square, but we wanted to be able to cut down that as much as possible. Not to mention you got the bonus of having a little bit of aerodynamics in the front there, because we've got such an aerodynamic vehicle, right? All right, now just to briefly talk about how the structure was actually put together. So the panels have been glued together. What the supplier has done is he's chopped away the foam, for instance, on this wall panel, and he's overlaid the fiberglass so that it sandwiches into the rear wall. Now, the actual finish itself is really, really poor. We're not impressed about that at all, mostly because the thing's not watertight. So there will be aluminium that caps it, but the whole box should have been made watertight. So we've got like 8 leaks in the vehicle already. So I'm gonna have to go around and silicon up absolutely everything, or seal everything up, and then put the capping over the top, the alloy capping. But yeah, that's one of our biggest disappointments so far. Total cost for the construction of the box, including materials such as glue, was 5,000 Australian dollars, which we felt was a very reasonable quote. In fact, most of the quotes we received, we felt were very reasonable. We are not so sure about that now after finally having the box back. Now there's a bunch of aluminium trim to go around all external edges of the box, as well as there's some aluminium for the construction of the build inside. That came to a total cost of $1,128. Now something really tricky that we found with the build was finding aluminium extrusion to fit 40mm panel. In Australia, most manufacturers of the fiberglass panel or making caravans, for instance, that utilize this panel go with 30mm. So that was something we found really tricky. The panel supplier himself didn't really have anything that looked good or looked very appropriate. So we ended up purchasing some alloy extrusion from a company called Styromax in Queensland. We measured it all up and had it sent over, and the supplier started to fit that. But that meant we had to get 2 30mm panels for each hatch and another 30mm panel for the front door. So it is a slightly thinner thickness, I guess, and that total price was $250 for the panel itself.
So the total cost for habitation box at the back of the Mog is 17,000 Australian dollars. All right, so since we picked up the Mog, we've cooled down quite a bit. We've got no interest into throwing the company under the bus or even mention the name of the supplier in this video.
We've tried filming this, I think this is now 6 times, and every time we look back at it, it's either too long or it sounds like we're having a bit of a moan because it's so personal to us what happened, and it spanned like literally months. We reached out to this guy in January trying to get a quote. So just, you guys don't need to know the full story. It's long and drawn out. Just to summarize, we're just very disappointed in basically the communication with the supplier, very disappointed in how long any of the construction time took, or even getting the panels cut in the first place. That took months on end. And mostly towards the end, communication completely broke down. We just couldn't get a definitive answer for when even an ETA on completion date would be. We were first quoted...
Could be forever, could be next year.
We were first quoted 2 weeks, and then 5 weeks later, I sort of was like, enough's enough, we need to start pinning this guy down, working out what's going on. So the reason you saw I was so ticked off in that previous video wasn't about the conduit. That was pretty annoying because he was meant to run, he'd tell me he'd run string right through all the conduits, but I can rectify that. That's not a huge issue. The issue was the really poor finish quality and the fact that he had given us health reasons for why it was becoming so delayed. One of those reasons being vertigo and previous sort of like a previous brain injury. Now, I was ticked off because we got there to try and install the windows because we said, oh, can we please just do something on the Mog just so that we can try and catch up on the amount of work that we've missed out on, sort of thing. And he's gone around having a great time with his colleagues, working heavy machinery and working on everyone else's project apart from our one, which was not the reason we were given for why it was taking so long. So that was when, yeah, it just became too much. So we went away. A couple of days later, nothing had changed, and we just said, can we please have a definitive completion date? No more ETA, no more stringing us on, kind of thing. And they basically, him and his wife said, no, we can't give you a definitive completion date. If you want the Unimog, I suggest you come and take it back unfinished. So that's exactly what we did the next day, and that was, I think, the day after that previous video you saw. We finalized payment and basically went away with a semi-completed project. And yeah, we're super disappointed because we dropped quite a lot of money. As you know, it took ages to get to this point.
Huge anticlimax.
Yeah, just a really big disappointing anticlimax. And it is a very long story that we're not going to go into. Never mind, we've got it back, so that's the good news. We've already, in the last, I think, 4 days of good weather, we've managed to learn a lot, get acquainted with aluminium, extrusions, cutting doors, making hatches. We've never done that before. We're wrapped with how it's coming so far, and we just need to basically complete all that, and at least the exterior of the box will be home and hosed.
Yeah, so it's all coming up in the coming episodes. We've got as well the main mission of making the Mog waterproof, which is definitely not at the moment, unfortunately. So yeah, stay tuned, a lot coming. Yeah,
we literally had, I think, 8 major leaks inside the box on that last big heavy rainstorm that was for about 4 days. The rains are coming back tomorrow, so we've managed to complete heaps. It'll be interesting to see what still leaks, and then we can fix that from there. So that'll be in the next video. Thank you so much for watching, guys. We'll see you on the next one.